Hello, welcome to Hat Trick. I'm Jordan Dollar-Coltman. I am joined by Braden Dollar-Coltman and Elliot Tanti. We are back. We were off last week for a very special surprise party for our good friend Braden here. Elliot and I were in on it. Obviously, Braden was not, as he was the surprise person. And Braden, on a scale of 1 to 10, how surprised were you?
Oh my goodness, it's beyond scale. Yeah, I was wildly surprised. So 10 plus. It was very special, very special, and great to see you both, Elliot. I don't know the last time I saw you in person, and Jordan, likewise.
There you go. Well, we're here together now, and we are going to talk about baseball, and we are going to talk about some hockey, and we are going to do hats off. But first, let's get to topic one. Okay, so topic one this week has been a story that has been continuing to percolate. We actually talked previously on the show about it in the earlier iterations of how it has evolved. Obviously, it has become much more prevalent to the everyday conversation on sports talk radio, on the networks here in the country. And I'm talking about the NHL's Pride nights. So teams have selected days near each other. I mean, it's around the time when the Pride season throughout North America begins. Different country or different cities, I should say, have different scheduled Pride weeks and whatnot. I believe Vancouver is usually one of the last ones in late July, but they kick off in the East Coast, and it becomes a huge celebration of the LGBTQ plus community. And the NHL in recent years has embraced an opportunity to celebrate that community, to continue on what has become a huge PR push as a league towards inclusivity, and moreover, the idea that hockey is for everyone. And we have seen different teams in different places do different types of events for different communities that are more closely related, but the Pride Nights are a league-wide initiative. But this year, as I mentioned, and as we have already talked about, there have been some pushback, specifically individual players who refused to participate or refused to wear the Pride jerseys or the Pride tape. And now we've actually had two teams who have chosen to scrap having their players wear Pride uniforms or, again, show any form of Pride support on the ice whatsoever. And in their cases, this is the Minnesota Wild and the Chicago Blackhawks, who in recent weeks claimed that it was for security and safety reasons for their Russian-born players. Obviously, Russia has a very, very bad track record when it comes to equal rights for the LGBTQ community in Russia. There have been some very, tyrannical laws passed in recent years, outlawing homosexuality and all these kind of things. So those players, I guess, feel at risk, and therefore the teams made that decision. On top of that, as we talked about on this show, Ivan Provorov was sort of the first one to come out, if you will, as being a homophobe and choose not to participate. And now we've had three more players in recent weeks: James Reimer of the San Jose Sharks, and then both Eric and Mark Stahl of the Florida Panthers, all of which refused to participate in their team's Pride nights. So it has become a very quickly evolving story. But I would also say, on top of the pushback we have seen, we've also seen some teams do some very positive, make some very positive efforts to demonstrate their pride, their willingness to embrace this opportunity to show their fans in their community that may be parts of these communities, that they support them, that they want this initiative to continue. We saw both Connor McDavid and Zachary Hyman of the Edmonton Oilers speak very eloquently about how they thought these were important events to have. And Hyman specifically, basically said, "I don't understand why anyone would be upset by this. This is a really beautiful and important initiative." I believe Darnell Nurse also came out and said something along the same line. So we've seen different teams respond in different ways. The San Jose Sharks, even after James Reimer chose not to do it, were very forthright as an organization to sort of attack this head on. They posted a whole bunch of things on their Twitter, basically debunking myths surrounding the LGBTQ community and some of the misinformation that has been out there. And all of that to say, it has become a very hot button topic and a very interesting conversation in and around the league, and one that I'm sure will continue in future years. I'll start with you, Elliot. When you saw this begin with Ivan Provorov, I know you were frustrated and disappointed with his choice here, but now that you've seen a few more teams, and the teams part is what I'm really interested in, but when you've seen the reaction and how this is sort of continuing to evolve, where do you think this goes from here? And is it time for the league to start to step in?
Um, I don't know. It's very difficult to predict right now. I mean, I think what's clear is that the NHL has lost the plot with this. What's happened is that the story is now about who's wearing jerseys, who's not, and why. And it's not about hockey being an inclusive sport for all. And that's a problem if you're the NHL. And so from a public relations PR kind of standpoint, my thinking is the NHL needs to pump the brakes here and rethink what's happening, because with every sort of instance that happens, the story moves further and further away from what we want it actually to be, or what they want it to actually be. So yes, I do believe they think they should stop, not because I think you should give in to people that are intolerant, but just because from a business standpoint, it's not working from the NHL standpoint right now. And it's probably leading to more intolerance, to be honest.
So are you suggesting that they should move away from having these nights like this, or what are you suggesting?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know that I have a solution right now. I'd have to think about one of the things. I mean, ultimately, this is about getting the story back on track. And so how do you do that? I mean, I think as long as that these go on, the more problems that you're going to have, right? So that's what I would say. I think moving forward, this has been a colossal mess for hockey, and it's reinforced narratives about hockey that we've been talking about in various different themes for a while, namely that hockey has a problem, and it's an intolerance problem. I was able to allow for some leeway around Provorov and being Russian and the challenge, the space that you're in that sort of space. And it was a sliver of allowance, but I was ready to allow that. Reimer and the Stahl brothers, I don't have any understanding as to their positions, religious or otherwise. It's not like the NHL was calling on some sort of change to gay marriage or something like that, or being political. It was about being an open and inclusive space. And so this is the worst case scenario for the NHL. What was something that was supposed to be celebratory and a market differentiator for them in terms of this Pride tape, which by the way, and Pride signs, which by the way is an Edmonton invention. Instead, they've lost the plot on the story, and they've exposed a lot. They've reinforced the narrative that hockey has a problem. So it's a massive. I don't know how to answer your questions. I'm just saying this is where they're at right now, and so yeah, something needs to change. I don't know what it is, but this is a mess for the NHL, I think.
So it's interesting because I know Braden and I spoke about this last week, and I sort of articulated the feeling that I do think that there should always be space for individual people to articulate dissenting views on anything like that, right? I mean, we can't really stand here and defend Colin Kaepernick taking a knee during the anthem for something he believes in as an act of protest, if in the same breath we're going to condemn these players for choosing to, in essence, protest this event. They have the right to do that, and I think that that's fair. I do think it gets messy when teams are now starting to do it, and they're using this idea that Russia and these Russian players are somehow endangered, which is interesting because I'm sure there are a lot of other pro-American elements to everyday culture in those cities that one could also argue is antithetical to the Russian way of life. So it gets a little messy for me there. But as I said, I think that so it's a two-way thing. I don't necessarily agree. I do not agree. I should say very adamantly do not agree with why these players are protesting, but I do believe that they have the right to do so. Braden, when you look at this whole situation and how it's evolved over the last couple of weeks, what are you left thinking?
I'm thinking about the other theme nights that we've seen happen in the NHL. We've seen breast cancer night with the purple jerseys. We've seen camo night to support the military. We've seen indigenous night or other groups within communities to support those people. And at the root and base of all of those things, like Elliot mentioned, this is about inclusion. This is about young people and all people seeing the team that they support in their community reflect them and support and celebrate those people. So what frustrates me is when it becomes this thing of these individuals making it about themselves, about their opinions on what they think or what they feel about a night of celebration. No one asked them about, the night wasn't there for them to say what they felt about their opinions. It was there to show, as an organization and as a league as a whole, to say this is we honor the space that is held for all people to be a part of hockey, and especially in the arenas. And so it does get messy when it becomes about the selfishness of these players saying, well, I'm not going to do this because it's not something I believe in.
So again, I would agree.
Do you believe in breast cancer?
Do
you believe in indigenous people? Do you believe in the military?
Sure.
It's like those things are there. It's not
sure, but we have a ceremony before every single hockey game that, again, is in and of itself an act of some form of politicization. When we have an anthem, and we are, again, as I said, like, is Colin Kaepernick meant to just sort of accept that the anthem is not about him, and therefore he shouldn't use it, which is obviously a platform? So I'm of two minds. One is that I don't have to agree with these players for what they believe in. And I also do believe what they're doing and why they're choosing to do it is incredibly misguided and is lacking the education around the actual issue. I do believe that's true.
And the points of the night too.
100%.
Well, and that's where I think I jump in on this is, I think there's a bunch of misses here, and people are going to be assholes. Hockey players are assholes. Generally, they come from, politically a very right-wing leaning position. We know that. They've talked about that. We know that that's the game of hockey. But I think the league has made a massive mistake here. And, teeing up these Pride nights, every city, every team, and clearly hasn't communicated to the players what they actually mean and what they're meant to stand for. Because I think if you talk to players ahead of the time about this is about inclusion and a safe space and diversity, and the response is very different. But instead, it's made to be about the politicization of LGBTQS rights, and a topic that's really hot, particularly on issues of transgender lives in the United States right now. And the point, that's not the point. We're not having a comment on drag queens reading books to children. Or the ability for two people who love each other to get married. What we're talking about is just creating safe spaces for everyone, despite our political ideology or beliefs. And that was obviously clearly not been communicated to the players effectively.
And even still, I mean, even if you communicate that, you may still have some dissenters. I would also like to point out, we're talking about 5 players. We're not talking about a mass
that's right.
issue here. It is frustrating that those two teams, specifically Chicago, with the already considerable political and PR issues surrounding them as an organization, is one of the teams that has chosen to just outright boycott it. I think just as aren't
there Russian players on every team in
most teams? Yeah, most teams. The interesting side note to all of this is, I don't know if you saw this, but technically the WHL, the Junior League, doesn't do this. It isn't an initiative yet within the league, but there was a bit of a fan-led, let's call it, push for the Thunderbirds of Seattle to have a Pride night, and a lot of the fans basically said, we'd love to have a night that does this, and so they just organized their own. And in fact, they just decided one night, the season ticket holders all got together online or whatever, said, hey, we're going to do this on March 9th or whatever it was, and they came together and they all showed up in rainbow gear. They all showed up with signs and whatnot. And the really cool part was that the players caught wind of it, and again, without formal team endorsement or whatever, they skated their warm up with rainbow tape, which is awesome. And it shows that these kind of initiatives do have a reach, and that they do make an impact, and that communities do see it as a positive opportunity. I want to play you a soundbite. We don't do this often on the show, but I thought it was a really interesting soundbite because it shows for me a little bit of the progression that is occurring in the sport, again, from within and from what I would consider a member of the old guard. Now, obviously, this is an individual who we know has a relationship and history with a family member who came out and I think educated him a lot. But I thought it was really eloquently articulated. The president of hockey operations for the Pittsburgh Penguins, Brian Burke, last night on Hockey Night in Canada.
Well, from my perspective, first off, there's two areas where there's been a matter of dissension or that we're not going to wear the sweater. One is for Russian-born players, and the other is for religious reasons. And with the religious reasons, it just doesn't compute for me. I was born and raised a Catholic. I don't see any conflict between my religious beliefs and the ability to say to the LGBTQ plus community, you're welcome here. That's all Pride Night is you're welcome in our building. They're not asking you to sign any forms, not asking you to join any churches. It's about saying this community is valuable and important, and we want to honor them.
There you go. I think that was, at least for me, one of the most articulate explanation or sort of descriptions of the entire situation that I've heard. And I think it's great that it's Brian Burke, because he is a member of that old guard, but someone who is clearly continued to allow himself to be educated, continue to grow. I think that 30 years ago, he probably wouldn't have come down in the same way, but obviously with his relationship with his son and just the way in which that he's continued to become an advocate for that community is fantastic. I think it was exactly my point that I made earlier. I think it's fine these players disagree with it. I think it's misguided. I think they're missing the point. And that's, I think, also to what Elliot, you're saying, sort of to summarize the whole thing about ensuring that the education part is on top of it, that the players who aren't already understanding or embracing the intent behind it, to make sure that that continues to happen, I think is also really, really critical here. Any last thoughts, Braden?
I want to keep seeing these nights happen. I think that it's really important for the NHL, other leagues too, but at the NHL specifically, to ensure that that they're doing everything they can to ensure that all people feel welcome in the game of hockey.
I don't know that I want them to come back. Honestly, I don't think they should be doing them. I think it's it's like a marketing ploy for an organization who doesn't.
It's performative for sure.
That doesn't actually share those values.
Interesting.
Like I have no reason to believe that hockey is inclusive.
So. How did they become inclusive without that kind of thing?
Well, that's fair. I mean, I don't know, chicken and egg kind of thing. I get that 100%, but I just
because it's not just the organization's belief itself; it's the people who are attending. You want the viewers to be a part of that as well.
No, I get that, but I just I don't know. It's like the black artist at the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Colin Kaepernick's still blacklisted, everyone. Like that. Let's not lose this. Fair enough. Topic 2 this week is brought to us by the Ordinary Podcasting Network's merchandise store. If you head over to ordinarypodcasts.com right now, you will see that brand new merchandise has been dropping for the last week and a half. New items for a couple of our biggest shows are available now. You can go find a awesome sweatshirt and hat combo for running down the clock. And the MCU and Me podcast has a whole bunch of t-shirts. Trust me, there will be spoilers. Head over there today to grab something to represent your favorite podcast. All right. World Baseball Classic. Elliot is very excited about this. This was an interesting event. It certainly gained and garnered a lot of attention, which is obviously what its intent was. Best on best baseball. We had literally, I mean, it came down to arguably the two best players of this generation, and Mike Trout and Ohtani, and they were head to head to finish it all off. And Ohtani struck them out. I mean, they're teammates in LA, but today they were going, or not today, at the final of the World Baseball Classic, they were going head to head for their nations. Elliot, you were the first one who really got us excited about this. Tell us why and why you think this tournament meant so much to so many people.
Well, I was brought to my attention by the fact that I could watch it in 30 minutes through the Sportsnet's World Championship in 30, like they do with the Toronto Blue Jays. It's a really easy way to get a fairly fulsome view of a full baseball game that generally goes 3 hours, which I know is Jordan hates, and rightfully so. And it ended up being the semifinal between Japan and Mexico, which was in and of itself an amazing game and a really cool game. And what was great about it was, and then you saw this as they continued on to the finals, is it was this mixture of different cultures related to the same game. The way that the Mexicans cheer for their team versus the way that the Japanese cheer versus the way that the Americans cheer and what we're exposed to in the MLB world is just so different. The relationship with the game is different. The style of game is different. The type of player that they value is different. It was a celebration of baseball, one in which that baseball is not had in a long time. And for it to end like it did, two baseball powerhouses, two players from the same MLB league, stars in the same league, going up against each other at the final at bat in a 3-2 game in the top of the ninth. With like it was so perfect and beautiful and so celebratory, and it rivals the 2010 Olympics USA Canada. It's the definition of what the best players on the best players in a sport can look like and feel like and should be. And it was outstanding. And here we are talking about it. The whole world's talking about it. I mean, you look at these TV numbers, it's insane. And TV numbers in international settings, what it's done for baseball. I think this might be a defining moment for baseball, honestly. And I'm on board, and I was there. It was awesome.
Braden, you're obviously a baseball enthusiast. Did this get your juices flowing, or how did it go?
Baseball always gets my juices flowing. But Elliot, this is the second biggest moment in baseball for you this year because you also became a massive Padres fan. I think that you couldn't have asked for a better classic. Like just as Elliot teed it up, the fact that it also came down to the very last pitch, and Ohtani's on the mound, Trout's at bat. Ohtani's like whipping 103 miles an hour in the ninth inning. Like this is prime. This is the best you'll ever see. And it really could have gone either way. Like two powerhouses teams. You look at their lineups. I mean, people probably don't know as many of the Japanese players, but they are very good players playing, in all sorts of leagues around the world. So just fantastic. I gotta say, I didn't watch too much of the early rounds. It's always nice to see Canada have a team in a sport that they're not as known for, but Team Canada's making their way. They're starting to find some more talent. It's great to have that program moving forward, but it's always fun. I'm sure we're going to talk about it, but I'd love to see it in more sports. The World Classics. It's exciting. It's fun.
So that was obviously an additional part of this whole story was sort of the reaction from the rest of the sports world. And obviously, if you're an Oilers fan, as we are, we heard the quote from Connor McDavid that kind of went viral about how he felt this is what the players have been asking for years is a best on best tournament. They haven't been in the Olympics in 2 cycles, might not be for 3. And we haven't had a World Cup since the last time they tried to resuscitate it. And obviously a big part of this right now is geopolitical. And that's the fact that I don't think the NHL wants to do this without their Russian born players. And they're not going to do that because the IIHF is not allowing Russian or Belarusian players to compete. And so there's definitely a lot of, like our previous topic, there's a lot of politics involved that doesn't necessarily, it wasn't an issue for the baseball side of it because they didn't have to worry about Russia at all. Anyway, they're not necessarily a powerhouse of baseball, so that wasn't really a factor. But the hockey side of it is. Obviously, I think we 3 would probably all agree we'd love to see some best and best. And certainly when it's generational, there's players here who you'd like to see compete with each other and against each other. We're talking about an opportunity to have, a Crosby McDavid team. The chances of that now at the Olympics are pretty much gone. But it would be nice to have some form of tournament that isn't just the world championship or whatever at the end of the year that most of the best players in the world don't go to anyway, regardless of whether they're in the playoffs or not. It's just not the prestige. It doesn't hold the same clout. It doesn't hold the same kind of importance. So I guess the question is, do you think there's a way for the NHL to find this? Does this event from baseball, which obviously I think the NHL does often look to as another kind of, they have some interesting relationships, not the least of which is that their commissioner was first in baseball before he came to hockey. Is this any kind of impetus? Will the league look for an opportunity to do this, or do you think it's just too difficult at this point, Elliot?
Well, Daly and Bettman are going to do what Daly and Bettman are going to do. So until we hear from them, I don't have a lot of hope around it. I mean, there's complications with this. You know, we did see an important pitcher for one of the teams, I forget now, on the American side, you know, take an injury at this event. That's going to impact his MLB team. That's always been a concern with the hockey tournaments as well, right? The Russia question is apparently an open one. I don't see why, but you know, that has an impact on things as well too.
If we're having teams cancel Pride nights to protect the Russian players, then obviously there's a lot of sensitivity around the Russian issue still.
Well, what I would say is exclude Russia. Russia, and it's just another example of how Russia's falling behind in numerous ways because of the actions of their dictator, president, war criminal president. For me, I think, you know, so ultimately we'll have to wait and see. They need to do this though. I mean, we need a best on best. If anything else, you know, look at going back to what I said earlier, look at what this is going to do for baseball around the world. We're talking about a catcher from Great Britain right now, right? Like that has impacts down the road for these businesses and these sports. And just from a business standpoint, the NHL is missing out on something here. It's very clear. They need to figure it out. And I think that there is an easy solution. I think you hold a World Cup event, you rush one together for next year, because clearly it's what people want. And don't let Russian players play. And that's fine. That's just how it is. I think that's the solution, and that's what needs to get done. Do I think that's going to happen? No way. Will there be some bullshit excuse about logistics? Absolutely. Despite this being the organization that figured out 2 bubbles in 30 days in 2 different locations during COVID.
Yeah, it's definitely about will, right? It's about will and want, and they don't have that right now. They don't see it as a revenue generator, just as they don't see the Olympics as a revenue generator. They've basically pointed out to the Olympics that they won't do it unless they get like a 70-40 or 70-30 in their favor cut. So, I mean, it's pretty ridiculous the way that they've held a gun to the IIHF in general, and obviously I don't think that will change. Braden, you want to jump in here before we wrap this up?
We've had this tournament happen before, right? Like 6-7 years ago, didn't we? The North American thing.
Every like decade they try it and then they never bring it back.
So why wasn't that successful? I thought that was wildly successful. I mean, maybe I'm wrong.
Well, it's a different economic situation that we're currently in, and then we're also in a different geopolitical perspective. But yes, I agree with you. I think there's reason to.
It seemed fun. I mean, yeah, you're right. The injury thing, that's always going to be a problem. That was always a problem with the Olympics too. But there was still so much more value to it than, you know, the risk of that. And man, I'm fully on board with this thing happening, regardless of all of the other pressures and yeah. But I'm also this bias is coming from a fan who wants more hockey and who wants what these players are saying is best on best. I want to see that just as much as, you know, they want to play in those games. So,
well, you know, there's been lots of talk about this. Let's jump in. Sorry, Jordan. There's been lots of talk about this, but you know, the Players Association has a new rep now, and I think ultimately this is going to happen if the players want it to happen. And I'm not convinced that there's an overall. I think the best players do want it. The Connor McDavids, you know, to name one. And by the way, who wouldn't want to see Leon Draisaitl against Connor McDavid one-on-one in sort of like a matchup? But it's ultimately going to be down to whether the Players Association prioritizes this. That's what I really feel.
Well, and when do you fit it into what is already a complicated schedule? Do you do it like the baseball did before your season and risk players missing significant time to injury there? The Olympic challenge has always been, it's in February. It affects the entire NHL schedule. It's interesting. I think that there is space, though, in all of these North American sports for some creative thinking when it comes to how do you feature your players. Look at European soccer and the additional club inter-league play that exists there. And obviously that doesn't work for the NHL or for the NBA or even the NFL because there's no competing leagues. But there are opportunities for teams to be formed with different players for these kind of specialty tournaments, or even within your own thing where you run a playoff like we normally do, and you have a consolation playoff for the teams that don't make it. And it's like, you know, each team's guaranteed an extra 4 or 5 games. There's a revenue generator right there. And you come up with some weird format that's unique or different, whatever it is. I think there is space for play-in tournaments and all that kind of stuff to exist that don't right now, that just take some creative thinking, but would be great ways to continue to grow your game, continue to find new audiences for your game. And most importantly, I think in the NHL's case, continue to find ways to showcase your best players, because there just isn't. I think I said this on this show the other day, but ESPN in the United States, I was in Seattle for a weekend. I was watching the highlights of the Boston Oiler game back in February, end of February. And they do this long spiel on SportsCenter about how exciting this matchup was. Best team in the league, Boston Bruins, versus the team with the best player in the league, Connor McDavid. They've done the whole setup, showed all the stats, all the graphics. They cut to some footage of the anthems, and they cut to Brett Kulak standing on the bench, and the commentator says, there he is, Connor McDavid, ready to go. They don't even know what the guy looks like.
It's because he's got 7 in his number.
The guy is the best player in the world at his sport, and the league's broadcast partner in the United States can't even identify him. That tells you all you need to know about how poorly the NHL has done selling these players, and there is space and opportunity for them to do a much better job. Maybe this is it. All right, that's topic 2.
Hey, I'm Sayer, and I love Marvel.
And I'm Kaylee, and I love someone who loves Marvel.
And we're watching through the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, or MCU, in release order.
There's another order.
For Kaylee's first time.
And Sayer's 85th.
Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find MCU.
And me!
Sayer's obsessed!
And Kaylee's the best!
MCU and me!
Okay, we're going to do hats off here to wrap it up. If you are new to the show, and if you are, welcome and thank you for listening. Hats off is a segment where each of us will tip our cap to somebody from around the sporting world that we believe deserves a moment of recognition. I will go first this week, and I would like to tip my hat to Juliet Lachunet Hubner. I'm going to say that I tried my best with your last name, and I apologize if I butchered it. I think it's French, but it's a hard one for me. She's the only athlete to qualify for the state championship from her high school. She qualified in an event that is a team event, and she won it, winning every single event. Every other school had one athlete for each event. She won them all. High jump, long jump, the 60-meter hurdles. I believe she also won either in the 100 or 50-meter sprint and the triple jump. So it was like a team track and field event. She was the only qualifying athlete from her high school. She went on to win the state championship by herself. That is an incredible feat, and probably the first and only time that'll ever happen. So my hat goes off to Juliet. She's from Ohio, a high school in Ohio. Congratulations. What a fantastic story. Elliot, who you got?
Decathanator, is that what it is when you do decathlon?
Decathlon? Well, I don't think it's technically a decathlon. It was like a team, like every school.
No, I get it, but
and then they combined the points for the whole team, and her points were better than any individual school. Just fantastic.
Yeah, it looks like it's.
But she could be a decathlete. You're right, a decathlete.
Yeah, that's right. Decathlete. Yeah. Okay, my hats off this week go to ECHL goalie Ryan Fanti. He's also got a great last name. And is a prospect of the Edmonton Oilers. Scored a goalie goal last night. We're always cheer for the good goalie goal. And so hats off to him. And very exciting that he is an Edmonton Oilers prospect. He could play for the Oilers one day, and I could get a Fanti jersey, and it would be so close to a Tanti jersey. So
that would be really good. We got to get him in.
That would be really good. My hat's going off to the madness that is March. It's not one individual this week, but we've had some wild basketball and just a lot of upsets. It's March Madness is always really exciting when there's Cinderella stories and upsets, and this one has not failed. We don't have a single number 1 seed or number 2 seed or number 3 seed left in this tournament. The Final Four as it sits, I do believe we've got Miami. They just pulled off an upset against Texas. We've got Florida Atlantic, which is a school in Florida on the Atlantic side. The Owls, which I don't think they've ever been there. They're going to be facing off against San Diego State.
San Diego, baby.
Fun fact. This was Kawhi Leonard's
Mater.
university, alma mater. So that's a 5th seed and a 9th seed in the Final Four. And then we've got Miami against UConn, the Huskies, Kemba Walker's old team, a 4 and a 5 seed. So we got some really, really exciting basketball ahead. And any one of these teams to win it is a surprise. Of all of the brackets, there hasn't been a single one that has not been busted. So my hat's off to March Madness as a whole.
All right, very good. We will leave it there for now, everybody. Thank you for listening. We appreciate it. And if you haven't already, please head over to ordinarypodcasts.com. You can find out more about this show or all the other shows available on our network. Until you hear from us again, that was Hattrick. Hattrick is a member of the Ordinary Podcasting Network. It's produced every week by Jordan Dowler Coltman and Braden Dowler Coltman. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network wishes to acknowledge that the lands on which our conversations take place include Treaty 6 territory, the traditional meeting ground and home for many Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, and the Nakota Sioux peoples, as well as the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. And we extend our appreciation for the opportunity to live, create, and share stories on these territories.
The Ordinary Podcasting Network intends to engage in conversations and dialogue which acknowledge that reconciliation is not a destination, but a journey, and that we remain committed to practicing our craft in a decolonized space.